All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Mountain View Public Library's online event, Gardening in Our Changing Climate. My name is Charles Mosner. I'm a librarian here with the City of Mountain View. And before we begin, I'd like to give a big thanks to the UC Master Gardeners program of Santa Clara County for making today's program possible. But without further ado, I'll turn things over to our speaker this evening, UC Master Gardener Mary Werthman.
Thank you so much, Charles, and welcome everyone to our presentation tonight. Let's see, can you all hear me? All right, okay. I want to start by just sharing a little bit about this talk first. The talk is probably going to be about an hour long, the presentation itself, because we have a lot of grounds to cover. So like Charles said, please hold your question until the end of the presentation. And, like I said, there's a lot of information we're covering here. So think of this presentation kind of like a survey course on different ways that we as as Santa Clara County residents and gardeners can respond to climate change. And I hope you will consider adopting some of the ideas here presented. The talk has three parts. One, the how climate change is going to affect our county. And two, how we can keep gardening as a local climate change, and three, how we as gardeners can be part of the solutions to climate change. Okay. A few words about us, though most of you already know us. A important part, important way that we advance our mission is through public education, which is why we're here tonight. So anyway, let's jump into the presentation. So it's always a good idea to quickly review the definition. So what is climate change? Basically, we're looking at big changes in global temperature, rain pattern, wind pattern, and other way that we measure climate over a long period of time, usually at least 30 years or more. And the changes are results of increasing amount of heat trapping gas in the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide, methanes, nitrous oxides, fluorinated gases. And according to a study by US EPA 2022, carbon dioxide make up about 80% of the greenhouse gas emission, and methane's about 11%, and nitrous oxide about 6%, and the rest also about 6%. But because of the big portion of greenhouse gases made up of carbon dioxide, that's why a lot of times when we talk about climate changes, we always talk about carbon and carbon dioxide. So that's the reason. So, okay. This is from NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies global map, and this is the most recent data where it was looking at the average atmospheric temperature across the world in February this year and compared that to the 30-year average temperature of those same places. And you can see there are a lot of red and yellows and oranges on this map. And that means many parts of the world have seen the average temperature over the long term have been increasing. And I was going to show you. Can you see the cursor here, Charles? I'm
Yeah,
just
yes, we
curious.
can, Mary.
You can? Good. So we about right here. So we are kind of at the edge of some of the long-term changes of temperature increase here. And we'll get back to this point later. Okay. So um, as you can see from the last slide, in the Bay Area, we do live in a more temperate climate where changes in our climates have been slower compared to other parts of the world. But no, make no mistakes, the Bay Area climates have been changing nonetheless. And these are some of the things, signs of climate change that we've been witnessing in the Bay Area in the last several decades. And in fact, the ones that are highlighted in red here are the ones that are more likely to affect gardeners. Temperatures, not having as much fog, especially for the San Francisco and coastal area, either on the bay side or the ocean side. Um, and the other important one is the reduction of chill hours, which we'll get back to later in the presentation. Okay. In the next few slides, we're going to take a closer look of several climate risks that are facing Santa Clara County. And these are risks that are identified by Silicon Valley 2.0, which is a climate change preparedness tool created from the County of Santa Clara Office of Sustainability Project. It's a great place to learn more about how climate change risks are projected to affect different communities across our county. If you just Google like Silicon Valley 2.0, you'll find it. First, we want to look at extreme heat. CDC defines it as periods of hotter and more humid temperature than average. And we as the temperature, as climate change, we're going to start seeing more and more of what we call climate extreme heat events, where we had several stretch of days where it was just unbearably hot. You might have remember, I think it was last fall in October. It was a whole almost like week and a half stretch. It was just unbearably hot and humid. Um, that is something that we're likely going to see more. And the map here shows you that based on the projection of what we'll call business as usual, basically the current trajectory of greenhouse gas emission, we are going to be looking at more days of temperature above 100 degrees. And basically all the areas shaded in bright yellow, light and red, light and bright oranges here. So middle part and the southern part of the county. Okay. With extreme heat, we are going to see some impacts on our garden landscape and plants. We can expect less summer water available because of more severe and more frequent drought, as also reduction of snowpack from the Sierras. At the same time, our plants need more water to cool through transpiration. Which is the way that water is evaporated from the plant to cool off. The combination of too much heat and less water available will put stress on plants. So watch out for these type of heat and signs of heat and water stress. Leaf curling upward, like what you see in the picture here of that cherry tomato bush. or leaf wilting or browning or fruit getting sunburn like the tomato here because of reduced leaf cover, which will unfortunately affects the fruit. Um, and other signs of heat stress and water stress is what's called embolism or cavitation, which happens when um, soil gets dry during drought and there is less water available for plants to take up into its xylem. And because of that, air bubble get into the plants. And unfortunately, the air bubble cause blockage of water movement through the plant. And severely enough, that can kill plants, even trees. So that is something that we would be worried about. Okay, next. Um, Another implication of rising average temperature over the long terms are um, basically expect fewer chill hours. Chill hours define as basically temperature between 32 to 45 Fahrenheit degrees in the winter months. And a lot of the fruit and especially the stone fruit and nut trees need to be exposed to a certain amount of chill hours in order to have productive fruit setting for the next season. When there's not enough, we're going to start seeing those fruit trees leaving out later and have less fruit being set and the quality of the fruit not as good. And looking at some of the data also, we can see this trend has already started for a few decades. Um, the chart here shows you basically zoom into the Central Valley, the big region where a lot of the fruit and nut production happen. I know it's kind of tilted almost 90-degree in order to fit in the slide, but you can see back in 1950, there were a lot more chill hours. And come 20 years ago in year 2000, we are looking at a reduction of, oh boy, more than 300 hours of chill hour. Um, so that is something we're concerned about because fruits, certain variety of food just need a lot more chill hour. And with this trend going, we would expect that some of those fruit trees are not going to do as well in this region. Um, on the opposite end is we're going to start seeing, we are also seeing what's called degree days increasing. And that's a measure of cumulative heat that are needed for either a crop or some kind of insect or pest to reach a certain point of its growth stage. And that really translates to us seeing more generation of certain pests or insects in a year. So, and I'm just throwing numbers out for example, like um, instead of seeing um, let's say 4 generation of aphids, we may start seeing 6 generation of aphids in a year. That kind of effect. Also, we could start seeing different areas in our region that were not hospitable to certain plants or insect becoming more hospitable to them because of warming temperature. So um, So that's something to watch out for. Another climate risk that we're concerned about is wildfire. With more extreme heat events, we're also seeing more drought and longer drought, and because of that longer and earlier fire season, and um, And when we have a wet year, that also means building up a lot of the grass that become fuels for wildfire in the dry years. Um, you can see on the map here that in by 2050, we are expecting to see more region in the county become more vulnerable to wildfire. And you can also see that with the development that happening in those region, we are seeing um, increased probability of wildfire happening in what's called WUI, wildland urban interface, where people build their homes or business or buildings where we have man-made structure getting closer to nature. Um, what is concerning about wildfire in Wui is that besides just burning vegetation, natural vegetation, homes and vehicles also getting burned. And when that happens, it releases more than just carbon dioxide. It releases also hazardous chemicals and air pollutant into atmosphere, which um, is something that we should be worried about. Um, a little bit more about that. Uh, excuse me. Um, the ashes that's created by wildfire a lot of time also have a impact on the air and the water nearby. Wildfire ash has a pH of between 9 to 13, which is similar to the pH of ammonia or lye. Pretty corrosive stuff and toxic too. And unfortunately, and we have seen this happen in some of the wildfire, like at Paradise or Pacific Palisade fire recently in Southern California, where communities affected by those wildfire sometimes will get what's called do not drink notice from their local water because of the ash um, ended up in the soil and water sources that become not safe for people to drink. From a gardening standpoint, the particulate from the ash also could end up covering the leaves of our plants, and that could interfere with the plants' um breathing or photosynthesis, making energy from absorbing the sunlight. Um, it also, the the particulate matter in the air also would affect the way the sunlight reaches us. And because of it, I think there have been times when the air quality is um, so filled with fine particulate matter that the the sunlight is just not as direct on us, and it's more diffuse. And there's been some study done in terms of how it could affect plant productivity, and it's so far been somewhat inconclusive, I would say, because there's a trade-off between the light and pollutant getting on the leaves. And so, and next risk that we're concerned about is flooding um, to communities along rivers and creeks, as we expect to see more frequent and stronger winter storm like atmospheric river. Um, this map here shows you the area that are most at risk of what's called either a 100-year flood or 500-year flood, and they're all along creeks and rivers in the area. Um, although it doesn't cover in terms of area, a lot of the the county, the area affected actually are really areas with a lot of population. So the dark blue here, for example, that that covers about 9% of the county population. And the 1 year flood that affects this area, I thought it would be interesting to note that sometimes the term 100-year flood sounds like, oh, this only happened once 100 year. Actually, it doesn't mean that. What it means is it has a 1% chance happening in any given year. And I think we have seen the last few years that it definitely has been happening more frequently than once every year. Um, and in terms of area affected by the 500-year flood, that covers almost half of the population in um, in the county, and and that is something that we should be concerned about. Okay, next. So, um, on the gardening side, what kind of impacts should we be concerned about? So floodwater, unfortunately, can carry contaminants, um, either hazardous chemicals or microorganism that could be disease inducing. Unfortunately, um, sewage line could be flooded, or there might be vehicles and other things that have hazardous chemical with it. So if the contaminated flood water ended up carrying some of the contaminant to your garden, what you grow, especially if what you grow is edible, vegetable and produce, that unfortunately would make the produce no longer good to eat. So if you suspect your garden's been flooded, make sure that you pick all the produce and discard them. Don't try to eat them. Cooking is not going to be enough to clean it. Don't try to dehydrate them or compost them. Just bag it and throw it away. The other concern of flooding is, especially with more and frequent storms, winter storm, is soil getting waterlogged, and combined with high wind during the storm makes it more likely for us to see tree damages. Um, Unfortunately, tree limbs, or broken tree, fallen tree could sometimes lead to power outages also. So because of that, um, it is one of the reasons that we should always prioritize keeping our mature tree as healthy and well watered as possible, so that they are less likely to be damaged in time of storms. And then the last main climate risk that we're concerned about in Santa Clara County is sea level rise and storm surge. Um, Pretty clear that with melting glaciers and ice sheets, sea level has been rising. And but what we're more concerned about is during storm time, um, in addition to high tide flooding each day, um, in along the bay, is the occurrence of storm surge, where strong winds also blowing the ocean or the bay water on shore, causing even higher flooding in area. And we are concerned about area in the light blue and the dark blue here, parts of Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, Aviso, and Mountain View also. Um, and all of those cities have been working on ways to make our community infrastructure more resilient as a result. Um, let's see. All right, let's talk about gardening. Um, so as you could see, climate change is ready. And it is really important that we're able to survive the disruption that, we kind of talked about just now, anticipate and adapt and flourish in face of these climate change. And that's the very definition of resilience. And what we do as gardeners have the power and the potential to become more resilient to the effect of climate change and help curb greenhouse gas emission. So let's look at some of those gardening practice and see how they could help us do that. So now we're going to look at some adaptation strategy first. First of all, as gardener, we need to protect ourselves in extreme heat. So when you look at the forecast and you see really hot days and a heat wave coming, make sure you plan your gardening activity um, ahead of time and try to garden in the coolest part of the day, either in the morning or in the evening, and take more breaks. And make sure you're hydrated. Plan for drinking at least a quart of water per hour of outside activity. Wear wide brim hat and loose fitting and light color clothes that help you stay cool. And don't forget sunscreen. Um, Also, watch out for signs of heat illnesses, such as body overheating, skin bumps, muscle spasm, headache, dizziness, and nausea. Um, know those symptoms so that you can try to take breaks from the sun and from the activity before those symptoms develop. After you take care of yourself, then here are some tips to help your plants to survive the hot summer months. Um, just as you want to garden early in the morning, water your plants in the morning. That gives your plants time to absorb the water efficiently and become fully hydrated before it gets hotter. Um, for trees, give them a good dose of deep watering. And actually, I know this sounds intuitive, counterintuitive. Water less, but water deeply because that helps train the roots to go deep, and which will help the trees become more drought tolerant also. Mulch. Put about 4 to 6 inches of medium shredded bark mulch. That will help insulate the soil. Um, and if you are into container gardening, try to group them together. Group the containers together. They could create its own little micro climate to help retain the moistures and or during really hot sunny part of the day, move some of the container plants to shady area also. Some people also have tried to use umbrella or shade cloth to give their plants a little shades. Also plants that grown along pathway that can reflect radiant heat, keep an eye on those plants because they get more heat from the from the radiation. And so if it looks like they need more water, give it to it. Give give the water to those plants. And then also try not to fertilize during hot summer days because um, fertilizer triggers plants to produce more green material, green growth, and it takes the plant a lot of energy and water to produce that green growth. And when it's hot, when it needs more water, and also stress to try to uh, produce more green growth, that's not a good combination. And that unfortunately will make the plant more water stressed. Okay. Um, Also, knowing the kind of changes in the climate to expect, we should plan for the fact that we'll see more intense rainfall and drought. And some of the way to plan for it is to consider adding rain gardens or swells or replacing your or instead of having concrete driveway, use permeable material for driveway and pathway. That allows more of the rain either go filter deep into the soil so that moisture is banked for drier months for the plants, or um, the rainwater also could be diverted from storm drain to be infiltrated into groundwater aquifer also, which again is good for our water supply. The other way to adapt is consider the fact that our climate zones are shifting ever so slightly. So before you plan when you start your seedlings or when you plan to um, put your seedling on the ground, um, double check first. Go look up the USDA plant hardiness map first to make sure that you're starting your seedling for the um, in the days that's right for your zone. Here in Santa Clara County, most of the area are in zone 9B, FYI. And then the other thing is start looking for plants and varieties that will do well in heat, um, or that can go quickly, especially for edible plants that, takes fewer days in order to produce what you want um, in terms of fruit. And that way, we're talking about less water and fertilizers involved. And also consider growing perennial because many of them have deep roots, and once they get established, they need less water. And there's also less maintenance involved. Okay. And here are some resources that you may want to check out when you're considering what kind of plants to grow in your garden. Um, And FYI, at the end of the presentation, I will drop a handout in the chat room, and it will have links to all of these resources. Um, there are a couple things I want to highlight. If you like or considering native plants, check out Calscape. It's a wonderful database, lots of information, and lots of way for you to query and search. Um, the right plant for your garden. Another resource I want to highlight is what's called the Future Favorites from the UC Davis arboretum, and it's a growing list that the arboretum is developing that they consider would uh, be more, they're plants that are more likely to do well in our changing climate. Um, and other things to that we should do to adapt to a changing climate is, and this is always just good habit for any gardener, is to monitor, make regular observation in your garden to monitor your plants to make sure they're doing well. And a lot of times it's those um, regular periodic observation that help you identify um, pests that you may not anticipate. Um, and also check out some of the local government, either Santa Clara County or the California Department of Food and Agriculture, to see what are some of the new pathogen or pests that we are worried about. Um, I think many of us remember in the last couple of years the quarantine from the Oriental fruit fly. So, and then and other emerging pests that California is really worried about is the spotted lanternfly. It hasn't made it to California yet. It has done quite a bit of damage, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, for example. We're really worried about because it affects, it in fact, grapes and a lot of the fruits. And because of that, California is really worried about the potential that economic damage that it could make for our agriculture um, industry if it gets to our county. Um, and for that reason, we want to, as much as possible, take out any invasive plants that because not only do they crowd out native plants that are great food source and habitat for insects and pollinator, a lot of those invasive plants also harbor invasive pests and really damaging disease. The spotted lanternfly I mentioned earlier, um, its preferred host. It's a fast-growing tree that is popping up in many places in California, including Santa Clara County. It's something called Tree of Heaven. Again, that's also the reason why California is worried about it. Um, there are many websites that you can check out, and they're all included in the handout that where you can visit to find out what plants are considered invasive. So I highly encourage you to check it out. Um, Another way to improve biodiversity is to, especially when you're an edible gardener, is to interplant, basically mean grow with those edible plants, with flowering plants or herbs. A lot of them attracts native pollinators and beneficial insects that prey the garden pest. So one example is if you grow cilantro or yarrow near your vegetables, um, the flowers from those plants attract green lacewing, which is a beneficial insect that prey on aphids, mealybugs, spider mites, leafhopper, thrips, and white flies. So um, anytime you can attract green lace, it's a great thing. Green lacewing, it's a great thing. Um, this is kind of without saying monoculture, like diversity help us to be more resilient because If we just all grow the same kind of plants, that makes our landscape more susceptible to new diseases, new pests, or changes of condition. So um, think about biodiversity when you design your garden or plan for your garden. Okay. So next we're going to look at some strategies, some practices that ways that gardeners can help mitigate climate change. Um, and the key is cutting greenhouse gas emission, especially carbon dioxide. And the good news is there are actually many things we can do to make a difference. And our small difference by individual can add up. So let's look at some of them. Um, First of all, plants capture and sequester carbon. So anytime we grow plants, that helps to capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, lock it in to the plant and lock it in the soil. So we have the power to help sequester carbon and reduce that from from the atmosphere. Also, we talked earlier about chill hours. Um, Consider replacing or planting some new fruit trees variety that have low chill hours, especially when if your garden have quite a few fruit trees or nut trees with high chill hour, eventually you will probably need to replace them. So um, once those trees are established, not only do you get the wonderful production of fruits and nuts, you also get the benefit of the mature fruit trees sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. Um, I remember a few years ago, in the depths of our drought, I hear many gardeners ask, should we really um, be growing vegetable in our yard because vegetable takes quite a bit of water and maybe the large farm use the can irrigate more effectively. Well, I'm here to suggest that if you consider also the carbon footprint, it makes a lot of sense for us to grow our own food when we have the space. Um, because produce that are grown far away need to be trucked in. And guess what? That generates carbon dioxide and emission. Um, Produce that were grown elsewhere are packaged commercially with packaging that are manufactured with a lot of times hydrocarbons also. And um, unfortunately, many, not all, but many farms also use chemical fertilizers and pesticides. They also were manufactured with hydrocarbon, which also have its own carbon footprint. Um, I know many home gardener tend to use less pesticides also. So that's another way we can make a difference in overall reduction of carbon footprint. Um, so yay for home gardener. Um, so this is interesting. Do you know that soil? Because I know it's even my kids sometimes is like, we grow stuff in dirt, right? No, it's soil, and soil is a living ecosystem. Um, it has lots of microorganism and lots of organic matter. And because of that, because it is a living ecosystem, healthy living soil hold over 3 times as much carbon as the atmosphere, more carbon than the Earth's vegetation and atmosphere combined. So it is really helpful and important that we support soil health. Um, and these are also other reasons why healthy soils are important. Um, Protecting the roots, sustaining plant lives and water movement, etc. And these are some of the ways that we can help improve our garden soil, our soil. Adding compost, mulching, um, a couple and I want to focus on a couple of things too. Cover crops. Some people call it green manure. It's a great way to introduce lots of organic matter in the soil. And uh, and it also um, instead for some people, it's a great way of preparing our garden for the next planting instead of tilling our soil. Um, and I know a lot of us kind of grew up with the idea that, oh, yeah, we should till our soil before we start the planting. It actually is not a good thing to do because it disturbs the network of living organism in the soil. So actually just mulching and adding compost is a better way to feed your soil and help it to be healthy. Um, and um, when it, as much as possible, use less chemical on the plants because, sometimes we think that, we use a pesticides to kill one thing, but the chemicals stay in the soil and it has impact on other living organism in the soil. So try to find other ways to manage pests. Okay. Um, Saving water. Do you know that according to Valley Water, about half of our water in the water that we use in our county comes from hundreds of miles away. So it's brought in from the state water project, the federal Central Valley Water Project, the San Francisco's Hetchy system, and transporting all that water require pumping and other way that use energies to move the water to where we are right now. All of that has its own carbon footprint. So um, the more we use water locally efficiently, the less we need to require transport of waters. Um, and I think we talked about some of those strategy already. I One thing you may want to, a couple of things you may want to consider is check out rain barrels. Um, to catch some of the rainwater that you can use later for watering your plants. Also, gray water, basically water that have a little bit of lightly used water with some detergent or soap, but it's still safe for non-food plants, can be used to water our landscape instead of using the drinking water from a tap. If you're interested in that, check out the Valley Water website. They have rebate program for rain capture and gray water. Okay. Um, Oopsie. Another way to save water is um, group your plants by hydrozone. And hydrozones basically means um, collection of plants with similar water needs. And then that helps you, um, that makes it easier for you to plan out your drip irrigation and customize the frequency of irrigation schedule, and mulching. And then, of course, if you still have a lawn, which by the way is a monoculture, um, consider replacing it with some more water-wise plants, that use less water also. Again, Valley Water also offer rebates program for lawn conversion and sprinkler to drip system equipment also. Um, so another way where you can be where we can be a solution to climate change is reducing food and organic waste. And I have to say, if there is one thing you take away from tonight's presentation, is this: cut down your food waste, have huge implication on reducing carbon footprint. Um, I mean, it was mind-boggling to me that um, we throw out so much food that were bought money that is used to buy the food and never get eaten and then throwing them away. Um, the amount of land is used to farm and produce all that food that never get eaten, it's bigger than the combined area of United States, Mexico, and the most popular region of Canada. And that's only half of the story, right? Because the food that get thrown away, they ended up in landfills. And guess what? The food in landfill decompose, and when it's decomposing, it emits methanes. And methane is a more potent heat trapping gas than carbon dioxide. It's about 28 times as potent as carbon dioxide. So um, think about ways that you can um, cut down on food waste and save yourself some money too in the process, right? So next time you go to supermarkets, bring a list, shopping list, only buy things that you need. Plan your meals accordingly that so you don't um, buy things on the spur. Say yes to imperfect food, basically um, produce that may not be the perfect size or the perfect appearance. It may have a dent here or there, but they're still perfectly edible. Um, and learn to preserve food, dry food, canned food, and share our bounty with others. And another way to manage our organic waste is compost also. Um, if some of us have the space and the time in our yard to create a compost pile, great. You can even learn, go to a free composting workshop to learn how to do it. But for those of you who can't do that, I think all of us by this time get a organic waste bin from a local trash hauler. Use it. So put your food waste, put your gardening waste in it, and they will compost it for you. Now, if you don't have a lot of space, you may try vermicomposting. That's basically um composting worms, that's basically feeding kitchen scrap to composting worm in a bin that you could even keep in your apartment if you want. Um, and what it's great is it turn the composting worms, turn them into worm casting. Basically, they're worm poops. Um, they are rich in organic matter and awesome awesome fertilizer. And if you go buy it, it's not cheap. Versus if you do vermicomposting, you get fresh um, casting for your garden. So win-win all around. Another way where we can make a difference is actually to prevent wildfire. And the way to do that is to create a more fire resilient landscape. I would say this is a huge topic, ones that we need a lot more time to discuss. So a few takeaway is um, you see on the slide here, there's the zone 0, basically from 0 to 5 feet that surround the perimeter of your house. Try to keep that as clear as possible, nothing flammable. Um, and then also there are tips to harden your homes to prevent it to make it less likely to catch fire. Also keeps certain vegetation, especially like dry grass, away from your house, and um, which will help us help prevent fire. And the reason is this, and we all learned that at the last few years, wildfire ended up being a major contributor of carbon emission in the last few years. So a fire prevented will save us a lot of carbon emission. For more information, look up UCCE Fire Network, wildfire prevention. It's also on the handout. It has lots of information, instruction, and tips on how to get your home hardened to prevent or lessen the chances of wildfire. Another way we could help is to make space for urban forest. It is the answer to heat island. Um, and many studies have found that area communities with a lot of trees are not as hot. It as city with very little tree. And for the same reason, um, make sure that when we're trying to save water, make sure we uh, use that water to water tree first, because we want to keep the mature trees healthy and last as long as possible. Related to that is there are different ways where we can use our landscape design to improve our home energy efficiency. Planting deciduous trees in certain area of our homes help block summer sun, um, and so we use less energy for air condition. Um, for example, we can also use plants to shade out air condition unit so that the unit is not working as hard. Um, there is a study that found out basically uh, large trees, shade trees placed in strategically placed can reduce a home's cooling energy use by 30%, which is a lot, especially if you think of the money that is involved to pay that energy bill. So, okay. We're almost to the end. And lastly, um, any way we can just reduce our consumption, reuse things, and recycle things will help us reduce our carbon footprint. Um, I think we talked about compost, organic fertilizer earlier, um, and using those instead of chemical fertilizer means less petroleum product is used to manufacture those products. Same thing for chemical pesticides. There are many strategies we can use from the integrated pest management approach, like attracting beneficial insects to reduce garden pest populations. Um, Another thing to consider is if you're thinking about putting in artificial turf to replace your lawn, um, consider the overall cost, environmental cost of doing that, um, because it's plastic, right? So it takes petroleum hydrocarbon chemical to manufacture the the artificial turf, and at the end of its useful life, it end up in landfills. So all of that contribute to carbon emissions. So versus having a living lawn or a living alternative garden, um, help with capture and sequestration of carbon. And it's just beautiful also. It supports biodiversity and insect lives. Um, Other ways where you can help save uh, how reduce the carbon footprint and also save some money in the end is we using material for garden construction or potting mix or pots that we get when we buy plants. We can reuse them to start seedlings also. Um, Instead of using gas power plant, maybe hand tools and electric tools. Um, One thing that was interesting that we learned also is try to avoid potting mixes or soil amendment that use peat moss because peat mining also release quite a bit of carbon emission. So, all right. So let's revisit this chart. So we have considered the garden practices that help us adapt to climate change, like protection against extreme climate weather events, improving biodiversity, monitoring pests, long range planning, garden planning. We've also considered garden practices that help us both adapt and um, mitigate climate change, like water conservation, urban forests, growing local food, reducing food waste, um, and education. Being here tonight, learning about ways to respond to climate change and sharing what you learn with other is part of um, the productive response to climate change too. Um, you know, what we haven't talked about, and I want to share a couple points with you here, is other ways of adaptation. I think sometimes it's really easy when we talk about climate change to be pessimistic because the problem seems so large and we are just individual. But I want to remind you one thing. A lot of times human in human ingenuity amazes in times of crisis because you heard the saying, uh, necessity is mother of all invention. Well, over the past decade, we've seen a lot of scientific advances that help us either mitigate or adapt to climate change, things such as electric vehicles, clean energy, and energy efficiency. And I want to share a hopeful development with you. So the University of California research have been helping California meet challenge of climate crisis in many ways. And I want to share one particular example with you because it is so cool. Sorry, getting dark now. So a few years ago, UC Merced, um, researchers may have proposed an idea to cover the over 4,000 miles of exposed canal with solar panels, with the goal of reducing um, loss of water through evaporation and producing clean energy. It's really a simple and brilliant idea. Um, and the Turlock Irrigation District decided to take up the idea and give it a test run. I just found out a couple of weeks ago that this from that test by the Turlock Irrigation District, the solar panel have started generating clean electricity. And at the same time, the researchers have found that the solar array shade shading the canal have resulted in lower maintenance of the canal, um, less growth of weeds and algae in the water and in the canal. And at the same time, um, the water below the solar array also help has a cooling effect on the solar array. So that help increase the efficiency of the electric generation. It's really a win-win all the way. How cool is that? And that's the kind of research and scientific advances that we all hope to see more of to combat climate change. Um, we talked a little bit about education also, touched on it. And ultimately, education is the multiplier of individual action. So by sharing what we learn, we empower other people to act and share what they learn to even more people. P.S. That is the core mission of UC Master Gardener too. I want to share another example of this, of why we want to be hopeful, why we should be hopeful of the scale of our individual impact. So you may have heard of the name Doug Tellamy, famous conservationist and author. The last few years, he's been promoting this idea, this concept called homegrown national park. It's an example of how individual action for conservation can collectively add up to a national scale. So Mr. Tellamy is challenging individual homeowner like you and me to replace the lawn with native plants to restore native habitats. And as more gardeners join in, their separate, disparate, private habitat event effectively become a biological conservation corridor for endangered species like monarch butterflies or honeybees. And when banded together, these homegrown habitat gardens can reach the size and the impact of a national park. So while individual action like what we do at home may seem small, but in our garden and us, a community, the impact adds up. So I hope you will at least adopt some of the climate mitigation and adaptation practices that are presented tonight, and together we can make a world of impact. So, and that concludes the presentation. Um, if you're interested in all the references um, behind this presentation and additional resources, you can take a picture of this QR code that will take you to the handout, and I will also, while we do Q&A, drop a PDF of that document as well. So I will go ahead and stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mary. That was a really informative and inspirational talk you've given us. So thank you. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
everyone is just digesting everything you've shared here. And please feel free to place any questions that you might have in the Q&A, and we'll get to them. I do have one question to start here that came in earlier. You were talking about rain barrels
Yes.
earlier. And one of our attendees was wondering, what about the West Nile virus carried by mosquitoes? Doesn't keeping water allow a place for them to breed?
So um, there are a lot of information you can find out. So I'm not the expert here. Um, but a lot of the time, the rain barrel system, if it's properly installed, there are mechanisms that keep it from um, mosquito from entering into the barrel to in order to reproduce. Um, but I would say definitely do your research, check out the resources available, and there are also workshops by many local organization on best practices on how to do it. Um, and honestly, um, when you harvest rainwater, it's not going to last for a long time unless you have a huge barrel. Um, once we start getting, a couple weeks or several weeks of sunny days, you'll start using the rainwater to water your plants, and it doesn't last as long as you think. So, but every little thing helped too at the same time.
Mhm.
So,
Great.
any other question?
Well, we did have someone else mentioned actually that there was a potentially a problem with the QR code at the end.
Okay.
We're not sure if that actually, it didn't seem to load.
Huh.
I
Okay.
don't know if you want to put that back up or if there's another link that we could put in the chat. It's also something that maybe we could figure out later, and we're going to send everyone a copy of the recording.
Okay.
We could probably send the link
Okay.
then too.
Sounds good. And I'm actually having trouble dropping the PDF into chat room also. So I think I'm going to email that handout to you so that when you email all the attendees,
Sure, we'll
you
do it
can
that way.
include that.
So everyone will receive a copy of the handout, and then a link to the recording as well. It might take us a week or so to get the recording up on our YouTube channel, like I said, but you will get that from us.
Okay.
So just, be patient on that.
Thank you,
Um,
Charles.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. Some comments. Marilyn commented it was really informative, especially with the food waste. I agree. That was one of the most interesting sections, I thought, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was what caught my attention too when I first learned about this.
Well, we're seeing some thanks here, so it seems you maybe you've answered their questions.
Maybe I answered a lot of the
Yeah,
questions.
it was a very, a lot of good information here. So
We tried. The team of Master Gardener who worked on it really, we spent more than a year developing this. So we tried to ask a lot of questions ahead of time. So I hope that show.
indeed it did. Well, if there uh, are no other questions, I guess we'll wrap things up here. So on behalf of the Mountain View Public Library, I'd like to thank Mary Werthman for generously sharing her time and expertise with all of us today. And thank you all for attending today's program. Again, as a reminder, this presentation has been recorded. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording later. And we do hope you will join us again at another Master Gardener program in the future. Okay. Thank you,
Thank you all
everyone.
for being here.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you.